Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and today I have kind of a surprise video where a new article came up on the Elder Scrolls website. This is a developer deep dive. Let's talk about class identity in ESO, and I want to take a look at this. A lot of players are confused, definitely, with class identity and this concept of class identity, especially with recent patch changes. Skills going up, skills going down, skills getting buffed, skills getting nerfed. Things are a little crazy in ESO, and I think this is a great time to have a discussion with the developers, so I appreciate them doing this. I don't know if this is going to answer the questions that we have. I think a lot of players want just the long-term roadmap. What's the goal? What's it going to look like next year? If we have to sit through all of these ups and downs like a roller coaster, what's the end game for us? Why should we stick around? So I hope that this article is going to address some of that. We'll see. I'm just going to read through it and then give a few of my comments here. So it starts off talking about class identity. Class identity has been an important topic, especially in recent months on the ESO forums, I would say so. In social channels and on the dev team, this loaded term can mean different things to different people, and we can all agree it's an important element in creating a satisfying combat experience. In an effort to improve how we communicate our vision for combat in ESO going forward, we thought this would be a good topic to dive into and share our perspective. Well, I definitely agree. The more communication, the better between the team and the players. I think that's good. So when we use the term class identity, we're referring to what makes the experience of playing a class feel unique from other classes, regardless of what role the character may be fulfilling. And we break it down into power fantasy and play patterns. So this is interesting to me. This is how the development team thinks about class identity. They have these terms that they use, power fantasy and play patterns. I've heard of these before, but I don't have a great understanding of what they mean. So let's continue on as they explain to us what it's all about. Power fantasy refers to the fictional justification of your character's power and how it's expressed through the look and feel of abilities. So they talk about necromancers, death magic, flesh, bones, all that stuff. Templars, power of the light and the burning sun. Every class should have a clearly defined source of power, and class abilities should reinforce that fantasy through their description, animation, visual effects, and audio. When you see a player using class abilities, you should have little doubt which class they are playing, and it should look awesome. So yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I can get on board with that. I think it's pretty obvious, necromancer abilities, they summon corpses, and they have death magic and all that. Templars have power of the light, sure. Yep, I see that. Wardens have animal companions. They summon their little fuzzy critters to fight for them. Yep, I get that. I just want to say that I feel like there's a lot more to class identity than this kind of surface level discussion. And I think maybe this is where players might be disconnected a little bit from developers, because players just play their class nonstop and they get very attached to them and they learn the class inside and out. And for a player, let's say who's playing Templar, they might be playing Templar because of the theme. Sure, why not? Power of the light. That's a cool theme. But they probably have also developed this other understanding of the Templar where it's not just that for those Templar mains out there. They also are playing a Templar, and part of the power fantasy is coming from the class ability themselves. Because when I think of Templar, I think about more than just power of the light. As a theme, I think about what the abilities are doing that make up the entire class kit. When I think of Templar, the first thing I think about is healing, and I think about strong defense. I think about group play and utility. These are the themes and concepts that I have of when I play a Templar. And those really come from playing the Templar a lot and understanding how the abilities work. Like that whole concept of defense, right? Templars have this idea of the ground-based AoE defensive abilities like Rune and Ritual of Retribution. These effects that when you stand in them, they make you more powerful. That's a theme of the Templar class, standing your ground, setting up this defensive perimeter, staying inside it, healing your allies, dropping down your buffs. That's what I think of when I think of the Templar. I'll give you another power fantasy, I guess, if we use this terminology. Let's talk about Nightblades. When I think of Nightblades, I think of stealth and invisibility, cloak, right? I also think of speed, maneuverability, high damage, burst damage. These are aspects of the class playstyle that extend from the overall theme of like this shadowy rogue character. So I agree that there is kind of this generic theme to classes, but classes are much more than that, and I think that's where some of the disconnect is. But let's keep reading. Power fantasy should not dictate or constrain your character's role in battle. We want you to play the way that you want, and in this case, it means any class can fulfill any role, tank, DPS, support, healer, to better achieve this ideal while also maintaining the unique fantasy flavor. All class kits need to include basic tools to fulfill each role. Okay, I think most of us can get behind that. That does make sense. To be clear, the goal is for every class to be viable and not necessarily optimal in any role without heavily relying on non-class skill lines. Okay, this is a really interesting statement that I didn't expect. Because when they talk about, any role can do anything you want, play the way you want, that to me sounds like they want them to be equally good at everything, which is very hard to do in a class system. Very hard to do. But I think they're reiterating here that the goal is for every class to be viable, but not necessarily optimal. And I agree with that. Templars, the way the class kit is set up, they're probably going to be the best healer. Can you heal as a Warden or a Nightblade? Sure. It's viable, but it might not necessarily be optimal. Same thing with tanking. Dragon Knight has been the optimal tank for many years in Elder Scrolls Online. And I don't know that needs to change. As long as other classes are viable tanks, Dragon Knight can still be optimal. So I do agree with that. So they go on talking about currently a number of class kits don't succeed in this role, particularly when it comes to stamina choices and healer builds. And those cases are prime candidates to receive additional attention and more significant changes in the future. Moving on, the second component that they talk about is this idea of play patterns. These are specific mechanics and behaviors you have to learn, engage with, and master to achieve objectives in battle. So while all healers might have an objective of prevent ally health from reaching 0, you can achieve this through several different effect behaviors: direct heals, heal over time, damage shields, damage reduction, etc. So each of these effect behaviors exhibits benefits and limitations that, when combined with a triggering method, make them more or less effective in various contexts. Wow, this is some heavy-duty discussion here. Direct heal, for example, can quickly replenish an ally who is low on health, but you have to wait until the ally has taken damage to use it and risk a loss of cost efficiency if you overheal. You can apply this same model of thought to damage and tanking abilities. Okay. I feel like I'm being lectured. This is an ESO 101 right here. Lecture. The triggering method itself is the other major factor of play patterns, since it defines the inputs and conditions you must satisfy to trigger the effect behavior. What is this even talking about? You guys, this is not telling me what I want to hear. Let's see. Most abilities include conditions related to range, targeting, resource type, resource cost. Nightblade, Grim Focus, Crystal Frags include custom requirements. Successful ability design demands a healthy relationship between the triggering method and effect behavior. The new design for bound armaments in Update 24 represents one of our recent attempts to achieve this within the Sorcerer Kit for stamina builds. What does this have to do with class identity? The combination of triggering method and effect behavior establishes the mechanical feel of an ability, and when you string together several abilities in conjunction with core mechanics, movement, attack, a play pattern emerges. These play patterns are critical to reinforcing class identity by differentiating the experience along 3 axes. Playing the same role with different classes, playing different roles with the same class, and engaging in PvE versus PvP activities. To temper expectations, it's highly unlikely we'll ever reach a point where every class in every role feels equally unique in PvE and PvP. Okay, I agree with that, but it's an ideal we can continue to strive toward as we revisit class kits and skill lines. Wow. Those last 3 paragraphs didn't say a whole lot. I mean, there was a lot of words, but it didn't communicate very much. Honestly, I don't know what to say about that. And this is the second time I've read this, and I'm trying to get something from it. Let me know, you guys, if you are getting something from this, because I'm not. Maybe it's just too early. Maybe I need more coffee. Now, you may be asking yourself how non-class skill lines fit into the theoretical world of strong class identities. First, they should allow to fill gaps in your build when your class kit doesn't provide the exact behaviors you need or are comfortable with. Second, they should open up the possibility of your character's build both in terms of power, fantasy, and play patterns by mixing and matching from the large pool of available abilities. Yeah, so I think this used to be true. I think this used to be more true than it is now, filling gaps in builds. But the problem with this is that with the ability power audits that are happening, especially the last 2 patches, a lot of those skills have been homogenized and nerfed to just make them more similar to class skills. For example, Destructive Reach. You used to be able to get a stun on a lightning staff, a single target stun from range with your lightning staff. This was very good for classes like Magica Warden, Magica Necromancer, who didn't have a direct damage stun for PvP. But guess what? They removed that from the weapon skill. So that concept of filling the gap disappeared. It just became a generic dot. But Necromancers and Wardens already have a class dot, so why would I use these? It's not filling in any gap that I don't already have. Same thing now with Dizzy Swing for stamina classes. Dizzy Swing used to fill the gap of, hey, your class doesn't have a stun. So you would put Dizzy Swing on for PvP specifically, and now you have access to a class stun that costs stamina. They took away the stun from Dizzy Swing, so that weapon ability no longer fills a gap. All it is now is a damage dealing skill that causes off balance. So you guys, the whole thing with like the ability audits that are happening kind of goes against the concepts that are being talked about, at least in my opinion. You can let me know what you think. So I feel like this statement used to be true like a year ago, but it's less true now than it ever has been. You should be able to mix and match from a large pool of available abilities. Okay, yeah, it kind of does that. Okay, let's bring it home. Let's wrap this up. What we don't want is to create scenarios where, to be effective, you feel obligated to fill a majority of hotbar slots with non-class abilities. You guys, this just happened. This is Scalebreaker. This is the Scalebreaker DLC. This is Entropy. This is Soul Trap. These are non-class abilities where, to be effective, you're obligated to use them. Forfeiting your class identity should be an option, but not a requirement to engage in content. We acknowledge this is not the current reality for many classes and builds, and it's one of the major areas for improvements. Okay, the team's focus: to look for more significant outlier cases where classes are lacking unique play patterns, relying on abilities outside their kit. So we're talking about the Bound Armaments update. The Growing Swarm update for Wardens are examples of this effort. Yes, I agree. Those are good changes. Those are excellent changes, and you guys should keep doing that. So we consider these changes to be a stopgap measure while the team evaluates more holistic improvements for each class in the future. We're not ready to share details on those long-term efforts. Why not? Why? This is a missed opportunity. The team is excited to push toward a future where class identities are unique, coherent, and satisfying for all players in all roles. If the team is excited, they should share. They should share with the players who are not so excited anymore, in my opinion. Hopefully we've shed light on our use of the term class identity internally. In summary, we define success as delivering class kits that combine cohesive, satisfying power fantasies with unique and effective play patterns. The end result should be the ability to fill any role with any class while retaining the look and feel of the class. So, just to wrap it up, I think this article is good in the sense that it's communicating between developers and players, and I think that's always good. I'm always going to say that's a good thing, whether I agree with the communication or not. I want to just go back really quick to the concept of class identity, because I think there's just that one thing that's really missing, and it kind of has to do with play patterns, but not the way they described it. They didn't describe it how I would describe it. So to me, a class is, yes, it's the power fantasy. It's more the theme. I would say this is the theme of the class, right? So necromancers are undead, summoning class. Wardens are animal companions, nature class, right? Nightblade, stealthy, rogue, blood magic, all that stuff is the theme. And then you have play patterns, which maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand this, but this didn't hit at what I wanted it to, which is it's how the class plays and it's how the abilities work together to create an identity that's unique. And I feel like this is what players identify with the most. It's the play style. So I talked about Templar. A few years ago in ESO, if you wanted to be a healer, then you played a Templar. And that's because Templars had passives and skills that specialized in healing. They also had defensive skills, group utility and sustain skills. They had passives that increased resurrection speed. That was the core mechanics of the Templar class. And so if you wanted that experience, if you wanted to be a healer or a support player, then you could play a Templar and you could have that fantasy fulfilled by the abilities that your class had. Same thing with Nightblade. If you wanted to play a stealthy rogue type, then you played a Nightblade, and it's not because of the theme, it was because of the abilities. It's because you had Cloak. It's because you had Crippling Grasp that gave you speed and maneuverability, and you had Lotus Fan, you had a Gap Closer. And let's mention one more that they didn't mention at all in the article, which is Dragon Knight. So Dragon Knight abilities focused on dot pressure and defensive mechanics. So if you wanted to play a class, especially in PvP, that was very attrition-based, always applying that pressure to your opponent and being very tanky and survivable, you played a Dragon Knight. And that was the class identity. So I don't think they addressed that well enough, where class skills really define the playstyle and the class identity. They're really together. You cannot separate them at this point in the game without causing a lot of players to be upset, which is what's happening. So for example, in the Dragonhold DLC, all dots got nerfed across the board, right? Well, that's okay, I guess, if that's what Elder Scrolls is going to be, but you nerfed the theme or the class identity or the playstyle of the Dragon Knight at the same time. A lot of those players that enjoy playing the Dragon Knight play it specifically because of that dot theme. The dot pressure build is what they like to play. And when you remove that from the game by making dot skills less viable, then that whole class identity just crumbles. It just goes away. There's nothing left for that class. Yeah, you still have fire-based abilities, and you're still a Dragon Knight, quote unquote, but where's your power? Your power just left you because a decision was made to nerf dots across the board. Same thing happened in Elsewhere with Magicka Nightblade. I really used to like Magicka Nightblade until they took speed away from the class. And it's not that they nerfed the class specifically, it's they decided that speed was too powerful. And so they nerfed speed buffs across the board. But that really affected the playstyle of the Magicka Nightblade, who relied on speed to get in and out and to avoid damage because they took the speed off of Crippling Grasp. So that element of the class identity has disappeared as well because of these sort of broad nerfs and ability audits that are making the abilities more homogenized and everybody has access to the same thing. And you know, the funny thing is that they thought speed was so bad, but now they're bringing it back. They're bringing it back so that every Magicka class has speed now when they cast a damage shield with a new Dragonhold set. I'm sorry the video's getting a little bit long. I was hoping for more from this discussion. I'll just be honest. I think it's a good start, but players want to see the long-term goals. They want to see a long-term vision, and they want to see more of the class mechanics discussed, because class mechanics, those unique abilities that affect a unique playstyle, is what really makes the class identity. And I think we want that discussed more. And with sweeping nerfs to things like dots, that takes away the class identity from, you know, certain classes that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to wrap up the video. I went on way too long. I apologize. Let me know what you think in the comments below of this article. Keep it civil, keep it pleasant in case a developer happens to stumble on this. Maybe we can get a discussion going. As always, I appreciate you guys for watching very much. Don't forget to crush that like button, and I will see you around in the next video. Thanks.